is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
We have got a phenomenal slate of college football games coming up this weekend. There are, I think, like 4 or 5 games. We've got both teams ranked inside the top 25. We're going to break down 3 of those games, talk down 3 bigger games, talk about the state of Alabama right now, and get you ready for what should be a delightful week once again in college football. Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Wednesday by Dr. Ed Feng. You can find his work over at thepowerrank.com and check him out on Twitter at thepowerrank as well. And Ed, just delightful slate on tap for college football this week. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's awesome that we have a delightful slate when I actually have a Saturday where I can watch it. I was pretty busy with some youth soccer and some travel last weekend, so yeah, I'm excited to not be traveling and to enjoy a great slate of college football games.
It should be fantastic, and it's from start to finish. You know, there are games at noon that are pretty solid, 2:30 games, a couple games at 6 that stand out, so it's going to be one of those days where you can go from one impactful game to the next, and even if one winds up not living up to expectations, you should be able to find others that will tickle your fancy later on that day. We're going to dive into those big games here today and preview them based on what Ed's model is saying in just 1 second. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. My first look at NFL week number 2 went up yesterday. I talked to Ryan Williams about his thoughts on the NFL futures market, talked about the Bengals, the state of the AFC North, and much more. Find that in your Covering the Spread podcast feed, also on the FanDuel YouTube page and FanDuel TV Plus, where you can also find tomorrow our full NFL Week 3 preview with myself and Ed, getting you ready for the big games over there as well. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia. Call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. And in New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Now, we're going to talk about the big games for this weekend. One of those games you could discuss would be Alabama. They got a game coming up this weekend. Right now, Alabama, 7-point favorite against Ole Miss. Pretty interesting game there. But Ed, I kind of wanted to have a bigger picture discussion around Alabama because they lost to Texas and had a relatively tight win over USF last week. Quarterback questions abound for Alabama. And obviously markets have soured on them because they're now 50-1 to win the national championship at FanDuel Sportsbook. So looking at your numbers, how much have they shifted in Alabama across the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, they've shifted quite a bit. As I've been telling people here in Ann Arbor, the bad news is that Michigan isn't really playing as well as we expected them to. But the good news is, like all the other top contenders to win the national title have also been equally, if not more, downgraded. So, I might add Michigan overrated at the beginning of the season at number 2 in the preseason AP poll, but we are actually and they might not be playing up to potential, but it's actually not a bad thing because teams like Alabama are slipping. When I do my numbers, I actually have them 5 points worse than I did this preseason. So they've dropped from 4th to 6th in the numbers that I keep for members on my site. And it was actually a pretty interesting exercise to go and look through my numbers. This was the first week I was able to get some adjusted numbers. So I am able to adjust success rate for strength of schedule. And the interesting result was like, yeah, okay, fine. The offense wasn't good. But what kind of jumped out was like the defense was actually 83rd when I look at adjusted success rate. Hasn't been much chatter about the defense at all. And when you dig into it a little bit more, I really do think this is a small sample size effect. All the teams that they have played are in the 100s in terms of offense when you look at success rate adjusted for opponent. And I'm not willing to say that Texas's offense is that bad. In fact, I know that it isn't. So it is a thing where you just have to be careful when you're only looking at a sample size of 3 games. As much as I trust my algorithm to make these schedule adjustments, Alabama having a below average FBS defense is just not something that makes any kind of sense right now. It's just an artifact of small sample size. However, they do have some problems on offense. They have tried 3 different quarterbacks. It looks like Jalen Milroe has won the job despite not throwing a single pass, or I believe taking a single snap against South Florida. They were 5 touchdown favorites. Kind of had to eke that out. I think that was actually another game that kind of got interesting last Saturday, even though we didn't really have the best games. But I believe Alabama was up like a touchdown late in that game. And I'm not exactly sure why they were on the road at South Florida, but it would have been even worse if they would have lost that game. So, yeah, look, there's a lot of problems when you when you've had a great run of quarterbacks like Alabama has. You've had Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones and Bryce Young. I mean, that's a pretty good run. And to think you're just going to get someone that good this next year is, you're more likely to do that than another program. But so far, it doesn't look like that's the case. And I think Clemson is also struggling from that exact same thing. And, we're at some point in the recent past, we've always had Alabama and Clemson at the top of college football. And that made a lot of sense. And they were able to keep that up because they had NFL first rounders at the quarterback position. That doesn't really look like it's the case anymore. Alabama's also really kind of dropped off at the receiver position. I mean, just a slew of first round picks there for a while. And then last year, all of a sudden, they're going to the portal to look for their receivers. So, Nick Saban has his issues down there. I don't put it past him to actually figure it out and make a late run here. But right now, it doesn't look great.
Yeah. And the defensive part, like you said, it may not be representative what we've seen through the first 3 weeks, but I think we can probably say they're not what they used to be there as well. Even if your numbers may be underselling them there, it does still seem like there is at least some concern there. And when you don't have a top 15 pick at quarterback, those issues would be more apparent too. So Alabama definitely struggling. Now you mentioned Clemson. They're in one of the bigger games on Saturday as well, taking on Florida State. So let's talk about that game right now. Florida State, a 2.5 point favorite. This game is in Clemson. Total is 55.5. And obviously Clemson opened the year with a really rough loss to Duke, but they've done what's been expected of them, at least from a final score perspective, at the past 2 weeks since that loss to Duke. So what's your read on Clemson entering this game as home underdogs taking on Florida State?
This is a really hard game for me, just because we have such a small sample size and we have 2 teams that have kind of been all over the place in this early season. Clemson lost to Duke, didn't look particularly good. They won against Florida Atlantic last week, but my numbers didn't really like their performance. They were 9% better in terms of success rate than their opponents, but that's not particularly good when you're a 25-point favorite. So I actually had more of a downward correction for them after the Florida Atlantic game than I did against Duke. And Florida State, On the other hand, got a big positive correction against LSU in a very good game to open up the season. Quite the opposite last week as a pretty big favorite at Boston College and had to really squeak out a win. So, it is it's I don't really understand either of these teams, so it's kind of a stay away from me. My numbers actually have Clemson by the slightest of margins, about a quarter of a point. I would have made Clemson at home a 1-point favorite this preseason. So, the numbers say a little bit of value in Clemson. I just don't feel like I understand either of these teams. And, they're it looks like a roller coaster with their play so far. So it's hard for me to figure out what to expect here. It does seem a little weird that a Florida State team that almost just lost to Boston College is almost a field goal on the road at Clemson. But I guess I don't trust Clemson and their situation enough to really bet this.
Now, we do see movement later in the week in college football, especially Saturday mornings. We see some stuff move. If this were to get to 3, like if it's +3 -110, would that be enough where you would buy into what your numbers say about Clemson? Or is this too much of a confusion spot where you'd rather just be hands off entirely?
Yeah, I feel like I might just enjoy the game here. Like I feel like if you want to bet this, like go dig in and find a player prop somewhere.
Right.
It just kind of confuses me in the game perspective.
Yep. We all have those games, potentially some on Sunday in the NFL as well. So I definitely understand that perspective on it for Florida State and Clemson. Let's talk now about Colorado taking on Oregon. Of course, no Travis Hunter for this game following that big hit this past weekend. So a downgrade there for Colorado, where they are currently 21-point underdogs taking on Oregon. Total in this game is 70.5. We talked about this game a bit last weekend, where you said you were most likely going to wind up being on Oregon in this game. Now it's a 3-touchdown spread. So is that number high enough for you to back off, or should Oregon still be more heavily favored than even this?
I didn't think that Colorado State would actually give them a game this past weekend. That was kind of unthinkable, especially when, Jay Norvell was like mouthed it off, which I didn't really think he had a team good enough to really do that. And then they actually take him to overtime. So, I'm pretty sure I saw on FanDuel that before last week, this line was Oregon -14 by 2 touchdowns. And now it's 3 touchdowns, which will kind of show you the difficulty in trying to project this Colorado team. I have it at 19.5 points. That suggests actually a little bit of value on Colorado. And, the Colorado roller coaster has been pretty interesting, right? Against TCU, I was pretty much right on the market. And then the next 2 weeks was showing massive value against Colorado. After the markets really moved, those 2 games ended up going 1-1. Now I'm actually close to the market again. So what's going on? I think we still have a lot to figure out about these teams. Colorado's is much better on offense than defense. That's not going to surprise anyone. But I think, when we came into the season, I guess I'm not surprised that Colorado can't stop the run, but they have a ton of talent in the secondary. This has the potential to be one of the best secondaries in the nation. Obviously, without Travis Hunter, that's not as likely. But, I think Deion's son is the next in line to jump into that secondary. So, when I look at my adjusted numbers, we're not seeing that secondary is awesome. They're 69th in my adjusted success rate. I don't know if that's small sample size or if they haven't really gelled. So big question mark there. I think Colorado's defense could actually be better than what we're seeing right now. And then with Oregon, I just don't know what to think when you've played Portland State and Hawaii so far, right? So you have one game against Texas Tech, but those other 2 games are almost essentially meaningless. The offense has looked really good, but the defense hasn't. But it probably should be better because Dan Lanning's a defensive guy, and they had 12 of 18 guys with 200 snaps back. I don't really know what to make of Oregon either, just because those 2 games you can't really tell too much. So this is kind of a stay away for me. I did my numbers did like the over in this game, but again, I don't know. I think the defenses could be better than what they've shown in these 3 games. So don't really have much of an opinion on this game.
And you mentioned your total model. I think you said before that week 4 would be the first week you're running the total model. So it sounds like you're running totals for all games now again, correct?
Yeah, I've got 74.5 in this game.
Okay. And Hunter obviously impacts the offense because that's one less pass catcher, but he also impacts the other side too because he plays cornerback, which is just a wild thing to have working as far as the dynamic here goes. I think it is very interesting, though, that your model is now showing value on Colorado, given that it seemed like the market got way out of hand. Is this an overreaction to the Colorado State game? Is it a reaction to the Hunter injury? Why do you think that suddenly you're actually above market, whereas you couldn't really catch up previously?
I mean, the Colorado State game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think slowly we're kind of converging to where this Colorado team is. I think I have them. Well, I don't know. I have them about FPS average right now. I think by the end of the season, that's going to be a little bit low.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Okay, so we'll see how that one plays out. Should be a fun one with Ed's numbers, even liking potentially an over in this game, but it's sitting at 70.5. Let's finish up by talking about Ohio State at Notre Dame. Couple of top 10 teams in this one. And right now, Ohio State is favored on the road. 3.5-point favorites in South Bend. Total is 55.5. And Ed, we've talked about Ohio State the past couple of years. It's been all about the offense, and they've been phenomenal there. But this year, the defense has actually made quite a bit of noise. So when you look at things like success rate, underlying numbers, do you think Ohio State can keep this up on the defensive side of the ball specifically?
For sure. I mean, I actually liked Ohio State's defense before the season started. They were pretty good. They were very good last year. It doesn't seem like it when you looked at the Michigan game, which is all some people seem to look at. But they were very good. They did have some issues with allowing explosive plays. That doesn't seem to be a problem so far this season. They're first when I look at both success rate and yards per play adjusted for opponent. I do think they can be that good. Maybe they're not the best defense in the nation, but I think they can be top 5, top 10 unit. And then, on offense, like I feel like they're slowly kind of figuring it out. I think McCord's been better as every game has gone by. At least that's what it looks like in terms of the numbers. So, yeah. And then on Notre Dame, I mean, they're actually have a pretty good upgrade since the preseason. A lot of the other top teams have fallen. Notre Dame is not one of them. They've actually gone up a little bit. I do think that, Sam Hartman has been a great upgrade. I have this game at as Ohio State by 1.5. So that definitely suggests value in Notre Dame plus 3.5. And kind of when you think about it, if you believe in this Notre Dame team, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I'm not betting it. I just don't know. This preseason, I would have made Ohio State about a 9-point favorite on the road in this game. And I just don't know if that big of an adjustment is at the end of the year going to be the right thing for this Ohio State team. They obviously are talented on both sides of the ball. That seems to be a huge adjustment. But, maybe Notre Dame, maybe they haven't fully blossomed into the team that they're going to be either. And that would justify, betting Notre Dame plus 3.5. A lot of question marks here. So, but it does seem like a pretty big jump since the beginning of the season, this 8 points. And I'm not quite ready to believe that Ohio State has kind of dropped that much.
And I think that a big part of it, too, is the fact that even though Ohio State may have dropped a bit, Notre Dame has come up, you still buy into Ohio State broadly. And that allows you to be more skeptical, despite the fact your model shows value here. And it is nice to get the 3.5. It's minus 120 at FanDuel Sportsbook right now. So you are getting the hook there, which helps. But I also do get where you're coming from. If the underlying numbers say Ohio State's defense is legitimate, it's sticky good, that kind of thing, I do get why you'd be skeptical of betting against them, even though your numbers do show value while knowing those facts too.
Yeah. I mean, and I think their offense is probably better than it's shown, and they'll figure things out on that side of the ball too.
All righty, Ed. A lot of other fun games coming up in week number 4 in college football. Where else do you see value for this week?
I actually want to go to this BYU at Kansas game. And I think this is actually a pretty fascinating overreaction spot. You have a BYU team that got a huge win at Arkansas last week. They were an 8-point underdog on the road. The game was pretty even in terms of success rate, but actually Arkansas outgained them in terms of yards by a pretty big margin. So they ended up losing there. Kansas went to Nevada as a 28-point favorite against a team that kind of looked like they were falling apart in previous weeks. They ended up winning by a touchdown. But the game was pretty lopsided in terms of underlying statistics. And to make a long story short, I actually gave Kansas a slight upgrade after that game, even though, they didn't come within 21 points of covering the game. So when you looked at the underlying metrics, it was a much better story. And I just think it's a really interesting kind of overreaction spot. Preseason, I would have made Kansas about a 9.5-point favorite. That's actually where the markets were when I posted my numbers on Sunday night. They have gone back towards BYU. I don't really think that makes sense. A couple reasons. Bob Stoll was really high on Kansas in the preseason, which actually makes me think some of my numbers are maybe a little bit low on them coming into the season. BYU is a team that really struggled on defense last year. They kind of seem like they're a little bit better on that side of the ball, but I still think the jury is out. They've added Keaton Slovis as the quarterback there. They look terrible kind of so far on that side of the ball, at least at some of the earlier games. So, I have this game at Kansas by almost 13 points. Another thing that works in Kansas's favor, I'm actually using an out-of-conference home field advantage here for Kansas. This is BYU's first year in the league. I don't think there's any familiarity with traveling to Lawrence. So a little bit extra. It's about an extra point for home field because of that. When you put it together, I have Kansas by 13.5. I really like Kansas minus 8.5 here. No injury situations. So I think there's a lot of value there.
Typically, Ed, when you're talking about betting this spot where the market's moved on Sunday, opens 9.5, gets bet down to 8.5. The market did stop at 8.5, so it's not like there's a lot of money coming in at 8.5, but it does mean you're betting on the opposing side of where the money came in at the part of the week where we expect more sharp money to come in than public money. But I feel like, tell me if I'm misinterpreting you, but it seems like because this is such a big reaction spot to what we saw this past week, you're more okay diving into a spot like that, knowing that it's a spot where it could be an overreaction, because sharp bettors can overreact too. Is that kind of your thought process where you're okay betting against a team that took a lot of sharp money on Sunday because even sharp bettors can overreact to a 1-game sample?
I think so. I definitely think there's a little bit of that here. I didn't see the game with BYU at Arkansas, but in the game report, Arkansas coach Sam Pittman said that BYU's defense really whipped them in the second half. I think that's something that you can kind of see as a handicapper and think that, that means improvement on BYU's defense. That could very well be the case. I think that maybe could be driving some of this. Obviously, they look good to win on the road at an SEC opponent. I think there is that could be the reason why. I don't know, but for whatever reason, I'm not hesitating in liking Kansas here. I do think it'll probably get back out to like 9.5. And Kansas's offense is elite. They're going to be at home. They should be able to put up a lot of points.
All right. So Kansas 8.5, where Ed is going there. The 8.5 is minus 110 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. But as always, Ed is back with us once again tomorrow to break down NFL week number 3. You can get that by subscribing to the Covering the Spread podcast feed, checking us out on the FanDuel YouTube page, or going to FanDuel TV Plus on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, Roku, or FanDuel.com/watch. Ed, if people want to find your work, where can they find all that?
Yeah, check me out at thepowerrank.com. Sign up for my newsletter when you get there. I give out 5 Nugget Saturday. Last week was not the best 5 Nugget Saturday I've ever put out there in terms of results. It's not going to, the results aren't necessarily going to be there every week. But what is going to happen every week is that you'll get a newsletter at 10 a.m. on Saturday. And some of the stuff I handicap myself, some of the stuff I get from other people. But check that out at thepowerrank.com.
All right. ThePowerRank.com. You can find Ed on Twitter at ThePowerRank. Check out his other podcasts as well, the Football Analytics Show, wherever you get your podcasts. I am on Twitter at Jim Sanas. You can also find FanDuel Research at FanDuel Research. Want to thank you all for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your bets. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow to break down NFL Week number 3. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.